A very warm welcome to all of you who are following this event, who are here with us either in person in Kőleves restaurant or online via the Facebook live streaming. My name is Bulcsú Hunyadi. I'm a senior political analyst with Political Capital, which is a policy research institute based in Budapest, Hungary. And I'm leading the organization's research program on radicalization and extremism. I'm sure you know the 27th Budapest Pride Festival started last Friday. Just a few hours after the opening event in Budapest, a shocking attack on an LGBTQI club was committed in Oslo, leaving 2 persons dead and 21 wounded. This tragedy has again warned us that it's crucial to stand up against anti-LGBTQI incitement, and just like as all other forms of hatred. Today's event is dedicated to the anti-gender and anti-LGBTQI mobilization in Hungary and Poland. This conference is part of a project which was supported by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. And this project enabled us at Political Capital to compare the situation in these 2 countries, in Poland and Hungary. We had a cooperation partner, Projekt Polska Foundation, whose representative, Milos Hodun, is here with us, and he will be also participating in the first panel. During the following 2 hours, we will briefly present you the main findings of our research, and then we will discuss the situation with our guests from civil society and politics in 2 panels. Of course, you will also be able to read our research report, which will be published on Political Capital's website in a couple of days, in the following days. Also, we will publish another report which will solely deal with the anti-gender and anti-LGBTQI mobilization in Hungary. And this report will focus on the Hungarian actors of the mobilization and their international networks. This paper also will be published in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned and follow Political Capital's channel on social media and also our website. Before I hand over the microphone to my colleague Zsuzsi Kellen, who will present you the main findings, I have to mention one more thing. Probably you noticed when you arrived you had to pass a kind of admission procedure down there. It was necessary because this event is part of the 27th Budapest Pride Festival. And it has happened again and again in recent years that such events were disrupted. With the great support of the Pride organization team, we have taken all the necessary measures, and we hope that this event will run smoothly. However, in case of any potential irregularities, please follow the instructions of the organizers, called szervező in Hungarian. And now finally, I hand over the microphone to my colleague Zsuzsi Kellen, who, as I told you, will present the main findings of the research. After that, the first panel with representatives of civil society will follow, and after that, a second panel with representatives of politics will come. Thank you.
So thank you for being here. I am Zsuzsa Kellen from Political Capital, and I will present the main findings of our research. The research aimed to reveal the milestones, narratives, main actors of the mobilization, to provide a comparative analysis of the similarities and differences between the 2 countries. And I will start with the social context. So the society in Hungary is largely unreligious and individualistic, while in Poland it is much more religious, and it's highly influenced by the by conservative values and ultra-conservative and ultra-conservative values, as the Catholic Church has a significant influence of social issues. And originated from these characteristics, the mobilization is much more ideology-driven in Poland than in Hungary, where it is mainly based on pragmatic and cynical political considerations. The political context is quite similar in the 2 countries, as same processes are present, such as the demolition of the rule of law and the building of an authoritarian system. And the governing parties in both countries built their politics on the intentional polarization of the society. And they use the same strategy for gaining and keeping political power. They constantly picture their country as being under attack of some enemies. And with some type difference, in both governments have picked the alleged gender and and the LGBTQI ideology and propaganda as the key enemy. So the evolution of the mobilization, as we learned from Esther Kovács' recent PhD dissertation, the mobilization intensified in Hungary after 2017, with focusing on gender studies mainly, and in 2020 it shifted, the focus shifted to the protection of children and families. And in Poland, the mobilization started after the victory of peace in 2015, and the dominant topic was abortion. And from 2019, the mobilization intensified and the focus on the protection of children and families. So the legal context regarding to LGBTQI rights, we can observe similar developments in Hungary and Poland, with Hungary being more restrictive in some respects and Poland in others. So the two countries are equally restrictive regarding policies intended to limit same-sex adoption and the legal recognition of gender change. And Poland has been more restrictive regarding basic rights, such as civil same-sex union, which is legal in Hungary, which has been legal in Hungary since 2009, and abortion, and with the introduction of the so-called LGBT-free zones in certain municipalities. And Hungary has been more restrictive with regards to LGBTQI-related content and education for minors. And several anti-gender and anti-LGBTQI narratives are present in both countries, and basically the same narratives can be observed, which picture the gender and LGBTQI ideology or propaganda as something that is attacking normality, which can refer to many things such as Christianity or conservative values or many other things. And this alleged ideology or propaganda is spread by various actors, such as, for example, the left, liberal elite, West Brussels, and the opposition of the governing party. And the main narrative in both countries is that the alleged gender and LGBTQI ideology or propaganda is threatening children and families. And there are some narratives that are only or predominantly present in Hungary, such as the one about György Soros being the main actor behind the spreading of the narratives. So in both countries, many actors are active in the mobilization, and so the situation is similar as both in Hungary and Poland. The main actor is the government or the governing party. In Hungary, the Fidesz government so the Fidesz government supports almost all of the other actors. It shapes the prevalence. The prevalence of the topic and the discourse and the narratives. And in Poland, although peace can be claimed as the main, peace and the government can be claimed as the main actor, it is strongly influenced by independent actors such as the Catholic Church. And in both countries, the actors are embedded in the international mobilization network, but having these connections play a greater role for the Hungarian government, as it is pictured as the government uses these connections to legitimize its sometimes widely criticized activities and legislations. So that was the brief presentation of the report. And now we will start our first panel with the civil society actors. So I'd like to ask them to come to the stage and sit down. Thanks. So welcome. First of all, I will introduce our guests. Luca Dudic is the Executive Board Member and Communications Officer of Háttér Society. Victoria Viki Radványi is the president of Budapest Pride, and Milos Hadun is the international officer of Project Polska Association, and he was our Polish partner in this project. So thank you for accepting our invitation and for joining this discussion. So the 27th Budapest Pride Festival started last Friday, and the closure of it will be a month later with the Pride March in Budapest. In Hungary, every year there is one Pride March in Budapest, and the last year was exceptional as there was another Pride in Pécs, and as far as I know, it is planned to organize this year as well. But compared to this, in Poland, there are several equality marches, which is the equivalent of Pride March, organized every year since 2019. So my first question is that in your opinion, what is the main reason behind this difference in the number of marches?
Thank you for the question, and thank you so much for having me in this panel and this project. It has been a real pleasure to work with you on the research, and it's a great pleasure to be here, even though it's even hotter than in Warsaw, which I thought it's impossible these days. And I think it's also important to stress that we just had our equality parade. This is how we call it in Warsaw. So in all the cities we call it equality marches, but in Warsaw is the equality parade. And this year's edition was very special because it was Warsaw and Kiev equality parade, or Warsaw and Kiev Pride, because two cities, two organizations organized it together, and there was a huge representation of the Ukrainian people in general, of people who live in Poland for longer, or they just arrived in last 4 months because they were forced to, but also activists from Ukraine came, and I think that just the vibe was very amazing. We knew that we were marching for equality on so many different levels. I think according to the organizers, there was 80,000 people who participated, which was even more than last year. Last year we had 50,000, and we thought, this is already like this critical mass. But no, this year it was 80,000 people, and I think, because also commenting on what Bulciu said at the very beginning about possible disruptions of events, I don't think we experienced that, definitely not during the Warsaw parade. And I think for the last 3 years, there was not even a single counter manifestation, which is a big change. Since, when we compared with 10 years ago, there was plenty of people. When Poland hosted Europride, I don't remember when it was, but our Projekt Polska was a part of the organizers team. I think there was more counter manifestors than the people in the Pride, because people were afraid. This year, 80,000, not a single counter manifestation. There were some people who were preying on us, but they're single people and not very damaging, I would say. But in general, it was very impressive. Before 2015, we had only these Pride marches in maybe 5 to 6 biggest cities. I don't want to give you wrong numbers, but only a couple of them. And then everything really changed in 2015, and I think this mobilization against the mobilization that was about to come, it was something that the NGOs who work with civil rights, human rights, and especially minority rights, and especially LGBTQ organizations, they saw that something is about to come, that something is going to happen. And I think it was a fantastic step that they decided to be proactive and act before they would be attacked. And we had new organizations that were created on the national level, including the Miłość nie wyklucza, so Love Does Not Exclude, which was this first super vocal, very... they were all about marriage equality, and also they were using very new forms of activism and very attractive communication, I think, that the old-style organizations did not use, but also many, many organizations on the local and regional level, and this was absolutely amazing. And as Zsuzsi said, in 2019, I think we had the peak of 25 or 26 marches, including those in the mid-sized towns and smaller towns. I remember Monika and I, we went to the march in Częstochowa, which is the spiritual capital of Poland, you know, with this big monastery with thousands of pilgrims going there on their knees and praying to the Black Madonna. And there was the first Pride March there, or Equality March there. It was a bit dangerous, but it was important to be there. And also in towns which are like less than 100,000 people, you know, which are on the between 40th and 50th biggest town in Poland. So we had these marches there, and I think it was super important that people felt, okay, this is the moment when we have to show that we exist before they attack us, where we have to show that we are people like everybody else, and this town belongs to us just like it belongs to all other people. So I would say this was this very positive reaction of the civil society, of the community, before the attack. So in total, we had Pride marches already in 40 cities and towns all over the country. Not all of them are repeated every year. Understandable, I think, because, you know, of the capacity of the organizations. But yeah, this is the tactics that Polish NGOs and civil society took. And yeah, Poland is a rather big country, so with a couple of, you know, cities that are really big. So there is a couple of centers and big organizations who are also helping the smaller initiatives, and this is happening. And I believe it will happen more and more because this works. This works, and we don't see much of counter-manifestors. We don't see much of aggression. Of course, there are some terrible examples, but in general, we see that if organizations like that show themselves in smaller towns, nothing happens, and there is this mythical maturity of the society that everybody in Poland is waiting for. You know, the politicians are always saying we cannot do any step forward because the society is not mature enough, especially in the small towns, especially in the east part of the country. And then you organize a march there, and maybe it's only 300 people marching, but nothing happens. And, you know, neighbors are just watching, just waving from the balcony, and everything is pretty much fine. So this is the strategy I think that the Polish NGOs decided to take, and it was very important. Now we see it even more. Why it was so important? Because yeah, they build the visibility, they build the network of allies, and yeah, this is how it happened. And I don't know why Hungary is different, but I think I will learn now.
We'll try to unravel that. So I think it's very interesting, and I think Poland, in this sense, has been always very, very inspiring for us. And we've talked a lot about it, about like why is the difference in the number of marches. And yes, I think a key difference is what you mentioned, that Poland is much, much, much larger than Hungary. If I'm like guessing it correctly, but Poland is not as centralized as Hungary. So in Hungary there's Budapest and there's the rest of the country, and there's like this huge discrepancy in terms of, you know, the number of people who live in a certain city, a number of universities, a number of jobs. So we've been working very, very closely with LGBTQ groups in the countryside for 6 years. I think we've been running a program called Budapest Pride Solidarity Fund, with which we fundraise for LGBTQ groups in the countryside, and we also provide them, you know, trainings and materials and contacts and mentoring and counseling and a lot of things. And what we usually receive as feedback from those groups is they are continuously losing people. Like, people in the countryside generally join these groups while they are going to university. So basically the only cities where we have currently existing LGBTQ groups, Pécs, Kecskemét, Szeged, Debrecen, Miskolc. Now there's a new group emerging from Tatabánya, but maybe except for Tatabánya, all of them cities with universities. So that is like a very important point. But after people graduate, they tend to move to Budapest or to somewhere Western Europe generally. So if, you know, these groups gather some people who have been working for a few years, they are very established in the community, but they just leave the city and they have to start over and over and over. And it's very exhausting. And, you know, in Poland you have cities like Gdansk and Lublin, like cities which are like known to be very culturally liberal, and these cities are like kind of proud of that. And I don't think we have like an equivalent to those cities. And talking about the first Pride March in Pécs, which was last year, we thought that it's gonna be a piece of cake. We've been working together with the group Diverse Youth Network, organized the march for many, many years. And, you know, Pécs is known, yes, culturally a very liberal city. They have a big university. There are a lot of music bands who originated from Pécs. They have a very lively civil society scene. And they have an opposition mayor. So we thought that it's not going to be an issue. They're going to be very, very supportive. And they were not. And they were really not. And this shocked us. And this really shocked the local activists. Like the municipality tried to talk them down for many, many months. And they were very discouraging. And they used, you know, questionable tactics to achieve their goal. And like 1 week before this first Pride March outside of Budapest, they published like a public opinion research where, you know, they tried to justify why they don't go to the march. And when they started talking to the municipality months before they announced, you know, they promised, of course we can, you know, give you an evening venue. Of course somebody from the municipality will talk on the stage. And they cancelled everything. So it was, they really counted on the city's support, and they got, you know, nothing but, you know, attacks basically. And in spite of the fact, you know, that the city is run by the opposition, the mayor was supported by the Democratic Coalition, and I think like they have a lot of like people from Momentum and other, you know, parties which are very, very, very present at the Budapest Pride March. And they were like, no, we are not going on the stage, and we are not supporting you, and we are not joining the march, and we are not. The march, you know, in Pécs, was on the day when the primary election started for the opposition, and they had 3 candidates, and none of them went to the march. And we were like, but here are your voters, like. And they said like, no, we would lose voters if we would go there. So I think that this plays a lot into why other groups are discouraged from, you know, organizing prides, also for the lack of human capacities. And I think this group in Pécs is the only LGBTQ group in Hungary, which in the countryside, who are registered as NGOs. All the other groups are like informal groups, so they cannot apply to grants. They basically don't have any financial resources. I think for most groups, we are the only ones who are financially supporting them, because for our grants, groups can apply who are not registered as official NGOs. And also they know that in the countryside, it's more likely that they cannot count on the city's support, even if the city is opposition-led. Luca, do you want to add anything?
Okay, so it was mentioned that so there are similar strategies in Poland. This mobilization is, counter mobilization is stronger, or somehow it has more resources for organizing more marches. And in Hungary, communities are suffering basically with presence, support, and everything that is necessary for being more visible or organizing more marches. So what do you see, or how do you see that as it was, so as we found out in the research that the mobilization was intensifying in the recent years in both countries. So what are the actual effects on the communities, LGBTQI communities, and organizations in more levels, like in personal levels, organizational levels? How do you see it?
Do you mean how the anti-LGBT legislation and policy changes affect the LGBT community, or?
Yeah, either that or any other element of the mobilization.
Well, I do agree with what you have been discussing, but I also think that there is a huge difference between the Polish and the Hungarian society when it comes to social activity and when it comes to protests. And I think even when we are discussing CE countries or post-socialist countries or whoever we want to define the region, I think Hungary is not strong when it comes to protests. I mean, when we think of Romania and the corruption protests, 2 million people protesting for weeks, resulting in the government, resigning, or when we think of the abortion protests, which were unfortunately unsuccessful, but still, I think they shook society and they shook Europe. Or even when you had the police brutality against the LGBT activists, I think the reaction from society was completely different, and I think that that is also partly the reason why we don't see that much mobilization when it comes to Hungarian society. And I mean, in Pécs it was quite a good turnout. We had 3,000 people marching, which was more than expected. We were discussing when we were on the way that, we have no idea how many people will turn up, maybe a few hundred people, and it was 3,000. We were really pleased. And the 35,000 people at last year's Pride was also an exceptional number. Or when we had the protest in front of the parliament last June. And I think that, you cannot really discuss why there is less political activity like that without taking the big picture into consideration, that it's not just the anti-gender movement, or it's not just the anti-LGBT movement that is pushing people into apathy, but also a huge number of factors. So that's my first thoughts on the topic. Vicky?
I actually wanted to ask you, how easy it is to organize a demonstration in Poland, or are most citizens fairly aware of the process on how to do this? Or because I think a lot of Hungarians are very reluctant of actually organizing protests. There were situations where we helped with some advice, and a lot of people are thinking that you have to have permission from the municipality to organize a protest, which is not the case. The municipality has nothing to do with you protesting on the street. So I think there's a general, it's an educational thing. Nobody teaches you how to protest, for a good reason. Do you think it's different in Poland?
I think it's very easy to organize a protest in Poland, and I think there's many organizations, including small organizations, who are doing it. And indeed, I mean, many researchers show that the level of development of civil society in Poland and Hungary was different when, let's say in 2015 as a base. And even though we in Poland, especially being a member of the civil society myself, we're always very critical about what the level we reached. Apparently, it was not as bad, or it was not as bad compared to other countries in the region. So I think there are many organizations who know how to do it and who can mobilize it. And then in 2015, as I said, we had many new organizations that just appeared, not only in the LGBTQI sector, but also in other sectors, like this Committee of the Defense of Democracy. So there's people who are organizing this huge manifestations for 2015. They were just created in 2015, and they mobilized 200,000 people every other Sunday or something. So it is easy. People know how to do it, and you always know somebody who knows how to do it. And so I think this is it.
If I just may add something else, I think that the last 2 years really showed that when we say if you're not with us, then you're against us, or if the government says that has been manifesting quite a lot. I mean, 1.5 years ago, when we had the Families Family campaign that was about supporting rainbow families and same-sex couples adoption, there were 2 people who were fired from the jobs. One of them because they liked a post on Facebook about the campaign, and the other person because they posted that they support the campaign. And when you have that existential fear that is instilled within you because of your political views, if the government wants to define it as such, because you support LGBTQI people, then you will have a lot of people being afraid of going to protests or voicing their support. And I think this kind of fear has been growing in recent years, and it is absolutely contributing to the problem.
Yeah, two things that you just said I think are very crucial also for the Polish case. and two words that you use, like fear is one. So when you ask about the consequences for the community and for the people, I think fear is the main key word. So Polish government and Law and Justice Party, so PiS, they are basically spreading fear. This is what they are doing. And for us, let's say we can call it mobilization, sounds pretty dry, just that this is a strategy, la la la. But behind that there is this fear. And there are people who are afraid. And there are also young people who are afraid. And they are teenagers and they are school kids who are afraid. So I think this is the biggest consequence in the society, that they made people afraid of being who they are. And I think, in Poland, again, we had a process after 1989, 1990, however, whenever we started. But it was a process. So we were going slowly, step by step. The support against homophobia was growing. The support against hate speech was growing. The support for civil partnership was growing. And then in 2015, and especially 2019, we had this massive campaign. We had all these means of the state, all the state apparatus, all the state agencies, and all the money that state has were used against LGBTQI people, so in favor of homophobia, transphobia, etc. So people who were getting more and more acquainted and more used to who their neighbors are, who other people who are a bit different than themselves are, they got them very clear message from the government, it's not like that. These are actually your enemies. These are not normal people. Like our president said, and the Minister of Education said, these are not normal people. They're ideology. So, and then people who were struggling with their identity, especially young people, they started to be afraid. And again, the consequences of that, they're horrifying. And we can talk about depression, we can talk about number of suicide, and again, I'm sure that Monika, who will be in the next panel, she's much better with numbers on that. But this is the main consequence, I think, on the societal and community level. And also, you said, if you are not with us, you are against us. So this polarization, and of course, they are using the polarization and mobilization for their political goal, and they do not see people behind this strategy. They did not see the people when they were attacking in 2015 refugees or migrants. Then they did not see people when they were attacking lawyers, judges, and then they did not see people in 2019 when they decided to attack LGBTQI community. They only see the strategy and the way to mobilize and polarize people to gain their votes. And this is terrible. But then also what is, I think, very important, what we learn from this polarization is that many people who were somewhere in between before, who did not have any opinion, you know these people, right? Were people who, I don't care, like, let them be. They started to have an opinion. And when the government is so good with getting like this new allies and convincing people because they have all this money and all these tools and all this TV, but also, let's say, our side of this conflict is a bad word, but let's say on our side, also we started to benefit from this polarization in the sense that many people who were indifferent before, they cannot be indifferent any longer, because they have to say, okay, now you have to say, are you in favor of human rights or against human rights? In favor of minority rights or against minority rights? In favor of women's rights or, so many people who were saying before, abortion. Now they say, okay, now we know what it's all about, so we are actually supporting the right of women to decide about themselves. And I think in this aspect is also one very important thing that happened in Poland is the change of the language. I think especially visible if it comes to abortion. So, right, we're still talking about women's rights and gender. So before, I think everybody in Poland was talking about killing unborn babies, like literally, even the progressives, like probably not the hardcore feminists and people who are really involved, but like people who were in favor of abortion, they were also saying unborn children, killing unborn children, because this was the wording that was present in the Polish discourse. And now we see how much language matters, and now people who are aware, and as I just said, more and more people are aware because you have to take sides. they don't use this language. And this is the same with LGBTQI people. People, they are more aware, they are more conscious, they know what they support and stand for, and also they choose their language more carefully, which is very important for shaping the society and the change in the society.
I think that's like very interesting. I think that we can definitely experience this phenomenon when like some of the movable middle started to shift towards us, because maybe they had an opinion, but it was not that detailed, or this topic was not that important to them. But when they saw that we are actually being attacked, that they, stood up for us. And another, I think, a very important difference came into my mind when we talk about Hungary and Poland, and its difference between how established the feminist movement is in Poland and in Hungary. And is the feminist movement allied to the LGBTQ movement or not? Because yes, you had these amazing, abortion protests. Like, just seeing the photos, it was so, empowering to see how many people were on the streets. I'm not sure that could be achieved in Hungary. I think like we don't really have like these big feminist organizations that a lot of countries have, who have financial resources and employees, and it's not really a thing. And there are some smaller organizations, and some are very pro LGBTQ and think of us as like the most natural allies that there are. But there are groups who are like very, very transphobic, and they like cannot imagine to do anything with LGBTQ organizations. And I had some experiences in the recent past when we sat down with some of these groups and said that, look, whatever you think, we are not your enemies. We have a bigger enemy, and they want to take away our rights, and they want to take away your rights. So let's like do a big protest together. It should be like, about freedom, about the freedom of choice, about freedom of marrying your partner, marrying whoever you love, freedom of establishing a family, a freedom of deciding over what you do with your body. So, and under this umbrella, we could, develop these narratives and show like united front. They said no. And that was a very, very shocking experience for me, and I've never thought that it would be so hard to find common ground. And so that's something I envy about Poland, that you have like these like strong feminist organizations who want to work with you. But I hope that sometime it's gonna change. I don't really see it happening in the near future, but in terms of what helps the anti-LGBTQ or anti-gender narrative building, this divide and conquer tactic is phenomenal. And the fact that even on like leftist media platforms, there is the only time like trans people are mentioned are in like a transphobic narrative. I think that plays like really wonderfully for the government. I'm sorry, I wanted to end on a more positive note, and I couldn't do it. But maybe one of you.
Just I would like to mention one thing, that right now in Poland, actually transphobia is probably one of the hottest political topics, because the chairman of the Law and Justice Party, Jarosław Kaczyński, that you probably heard of, 2 days ago, he was basically laughing and giggling about transgender people. And in a way that was, I really find it like one of the most disgusting things like this guy actually said ever, because this was not even like, giving criticism, but just giving this nasty little jokes and like giggle and make all his audience also giggle. So it was, but I think this is, again, will open a discussion in the society, and more people will also join the good side. And of course, this should never happen. We should never have triggers like that, because this is not the point. But I think Poland is right now just at the beginning of a bigger discussion about transphobia, and again, it was provoked by the guys who are very transphobic, unfortunately.
Thank you. So,
do you like moderating us?
Yes, it's really good. So, on both sides, it was mentioned that there's growing fear and polarization is really bad for the society in general. And my question is that, in your opinion, what strategies can work to reduce it or to mobilize people to stand up for human rights or for these groups that are affected in the anti-gender and anti-LGBTQI mobilization? So in general, or if you want, you can just mention like examples from the past you've seen or you've organized.
I think the recent referendum campaign might be a good example. We had an anti-LGBT referendum here in Hungary, and civil society launched a campaign, a counter-campaign to invalidate the referendum, which was, I think, surprisingly successful.
And led by you.
Led by Amnesty International, Hungarian Harrier Society. And what we did is that we had 4 questions that were so, you know, ultimately biased and manipulative, and we just said, you know, we don't have time to really explain to society like what is wrong with these questions. Like, obviously we made like an FAQ. If you were really interested, then you could go on our website and read it 100%. But what we did was we reframed the whole referendum. The government wanted this to be a child protection referendum, and then we said, you know, this referendum is about the safety and the freedom of people living in Hungary. Do you want to live in a country where everyone can feel safe, whether that be at the workplace or on the public transport? Because if you want to live in a place like that, then you have to vote invalidly. And you know, we had these. So this message, I think it was quite hopeful, and this was something that a lot of people could relate to. And then the next thing that we did is that we brought up, well, less positive and hopeful, but I think quite effective personal stories. A lesbian couple being attacked on the tram, you know, being held at knife point because they were holding hands. And if you ask, because a lot of people were still, oh, you know, because you're just coming to the schools and the kindergartens, you know, with these scissors and this LGBT propaganda.
Scissors?
Yeah, you know, like the, you want to operate our kids kind of thing. It was quite shocking to meet with some people like that. We went to 20 different towns with the campaign to flyer and talk to locals, and there were actual people who did believe that, you know, we were about to go to the kindergartens. Obviously, that did not happen, if I do have to say that. But they were still like, oh, because that's what you want to do and you have no issues and you're just trying to create tension in society. And when you bring up those personal stories, or when you share what happened to you when you were in high school, or what LGBT youth experiences, or you know, workplace discrimination with very concrete examples, then it's very hard to be like, oh, well, you know, this is not a problem, you know, like, because when you ask them, do you want to live in a country where you can feel safe when you are holding your partner's hand, who is going to say no? And that is something I think is very important about gestures that we see, is that I do appreciate gestures, I do appreciate rainbow flags, but rainbow flags are, you know, I think easier to tear down, and when you actually take very meaningful action about LGBTQI inclusion, nobody is going to protest that, or a lot less people are going to protest if you make, for example, healthcare more inclusive for LGBTQI people, because that is not something that is very, you know, Instagrammable for far-right people. So I think that is what we have been trying to do, but I'm very interested in your experience.
You go.
Me. Okay, many things, but I would add here, because the question is about the success stories, right? Or like how to...
Yes, and strategies in general to reduce fear and polarization.
Okay, to reduce I'm not sure about you know, to reduce fear and polarization. And definitely education is the thing, right? So and visibility. So for me, this would be these two things. And definitely, so if we talk about education, definitely it will not be in the case of Poland right now, the school education, because LGBTQI organizations are effectively banned from schools. You cannot enter, because you will be punished by the superintendent or by the Ministry of Education. So the education just need to move elsewhere. So so again, NGOs, civil society is the key, and information campaigns. So, and when we talk about education, we're not talking. I mean, I'm not talking only about education of the youngest part of the population, but also about education of the adults, because also they need education in this area, and this is only something that NGOs can do. So I would say, again, we must do everything to support civil society, because this is something that they can do. And then it's visibility, because this is this very, very simple and easy rule. If you finally get to know a gay couple or a lesbian family or a transgender person, you are most likely less vulnerable towards this mobilization that the right-wingers or people who are homophobic or transphobic, they are preparing for you as a fantastic offer. So, and here one of my favorite tactics is the visibility in like soap operas and this kind of stuff. I think this really works. And I think that the fact that, which brings us actually to a bigger topic about media pluralism. So we can talk about soap operas, but this again brings us to the important political topic of media pluralism. And again, in Poland, we are luckier probably than you in Hungary if it comes to the media landscape, because it's much more diverse, including the TV. So we have, of course, the public state-owned broadcaster, but also we have private TVs who are doing different stuff and who are normalizing the image of LGBTQI community in their programs, in their TV shows. And I think this is really important, because this gay guy in the soap opera that your grandma watches every day probably is the only gay guy that your grandma watches every day. And this is really the key that they are there. And I think that there are beautiful things done right now by TV stations, by groups like media groups in cooperation with LGBTQ organizations in Poland. So really, yeah, I mean, there's more and more open, I think, discussion about also about the sexuality education in this programs. I think in Poland right now, Netflix trained and hired 2 people who are, and I don't know how to translate this job, but these people who are actually making actors, comfortable in scenes, intimate scenes in the movies and in the programs. So there is lots of going on, I think, in this field, in the cooperation between people from civil sector and the media platforms, and I find it really, really important. And also one thing that is a successful thing that happens in Poland, and today is a really symbolic day, is the litigation. So today actually is the day when the Supreme Court of Poland decided that the first ever LGBT free zone declaration is null and invalid. So basically it was the first one ever declared in a very small town, and it had to go through all the steps of the judiciary. So from the let's say the city court, now today was the verdict of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said this is not piece of law in Poland because it's discriminatory, and this village council had no right to do it. And this is something that happened because of civil society. This is civil society sued the municipality and took all these necessary steps to go all the way to the Supreme Court. There's also a big role here of the Polish ombudsman, especially the former one who was replaced last year. We'll see how about the new one, but he was extremely active in this field, and he was cooperating with the civil society. And so litigation, I mean, still using the courts. And I know that you hear a lot about Polish courts from the not very shiny and nice perspective or angle, but still there's many independent judges in Poland who are doing good job, the proper job they should do. And today we had an example of that. So yeah, litigation, education, and more visibility.
This is like a difficult question for me, because I don't think that it's like the campaigning knowledge that civil society is lacking, or I don't know, the tools or the political advisors or the graphic designers or the PPC experts that are missing, from the mix. And I think you touched on a lot of like very important like key points, like the media situation in Hungary is pretty terrible. And even when you look at the independent media, for example, there was a very big commercial TV channel who shot an interview with me about something, Valentine's Day. We did something together for Valentine's, the Empty Tables campaign, yes, I just remembered. And it was about, you know, same-sex couples who are afraid to go out for a public dinner on Valentine's Day. And we shot an interview which would have been, you know, broadcasted at around, at Focus, I don't know what time it is, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., something like that. And like later that day, they called me on the phone that, oh, sorry, we've just realized that this goes against the law, so we will not, you know, publish the interview and we will just put it online. And, you know, this is an independent media channel. This is not the propaganda media. And they are still, you know, routinely canceling LGBTQ content, even that, you know, I was not kissing my girlfriend in the interview, okay? So there was nothing, you know, gay going on the picture. Well, except me being there, so, you know, maybe it was gay enough, who knows? I don't know how to judge these situations, but, and still we had a commercial for the Pride Month, and we do it every year, and we just finished shooting the commercial, and there are two, you know, big commercial TV channels who run our commercial every year. And this was the first year that, you know, one of them said that, no, this actually goes against the law, and of course we don't agree with that, and we are looking into the legal stuff right now. But they said that, you know, sorry, we are not doing this because in the last scene, two guys are holding hands. And like that's it. That's the all, you know, same-sex attraction that goes on, besides our logo. So I think this is, you know, extremely hard because the only platform that we have is basically social media ads. And especially, you know, when you were running the referendum campaign and we were running like an election mobilization campaign, and it was really, really hard to get your messages to the people because all the billboard places were booked, and you know most billboard places are also owned by oligarchs, so they're not there. All the newspaper, you know, ads were already bought, and a lot of newspapers actually declared that they are not running anything political during the election campaign, which affected your campaign and our campaign. And there was such a high competition for Facebook and YouTube and Instagram ads that it was much, much, much more expensive to, you know, get to the usual amount of people. And of course, the rule of law problem, like our ombudsperson is just flat on terrible. Like since I don't know how many anti-LGBTQ laws we currently have, 3, 4, 5. So he hasn't spoken about any of those. Like, and you know we knew that, you know, he has the materials prepped, you know, on his table and it's ready to go, and it just never aired. And he was, you know, reclassified for a Class B ombudsperson. He used to be a Class A ombudsperson, but he's not anymore. What at Budapest Pride, what we think about, you know, in terms of tactics, for the past, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years, we've always been talking about like rebuilding civil society, and this also goes back to what you said. Like, if you want to do advocacy through litigation, you need the lawyers. You need the human capacity to do that. And in a lot of cases, when we have, I don't know, hateful comments, or we have some, you know, discrimination case or something, whenever we reach out to the big, you know, legal NGOs, there's a very, very hardcore like capacity assessment. Like, okay, like, is this winnable? If not really, they're most likely not to do it. Do we have the capacity for this? And if they have a lot of other type of cases going on, it's less likely that they will take on your case. And maybe we had like a longer period when civil society was just like being bled out, and our financial resources were like taken away repeatedly for, I don't know, 12 years. So there are like less people who remain here and still want to work. There are a lot of activists who like burn out and leave the country, or just decide to, I don't know, become truck drivers instead of activists, because then, you know, at least you're not gonna die of high blood pressure at the age of 40. So, okay, I'm very pessimistic right now, I'm just hearing it. And I don't know how to turn this around, but I'm very tired because it's Pride Month, so that's a reason. But our goal is, and that's why we have this 1 month long festival, that's why anybody can organize a program to the Pride Festival, because we think that we have to contribute to rebuilding civil society in Hungary as much as possible. So when the shit hits the fan, we have the capacity. Like you can fundraise like $100,000, $200,000 for a communication campaign if you don't have a staff to actually execute it, and that's like very difficult. That we don't have the money, but sometimes even like throwing a lot of money at us for a very rapid response doesn't really help, because our members are gone and they're not here, and we lack a lot of expertise and human resources that we need. I haven't answered your question. I'm really sorry about it.
You don't have to be sorry. So yeah, we have 10 more minutes left. So now I would like to ask you about what you think about the possibility of international cooperation of the civil society in this topic. For example, as we have learned that there are similarities between the situation of Poland and Hungary. So do you see any perspective in it, or do you see, or is there something ongoing already, or so, and how could it contribute to the activities?
HATER as an organization has a lot of EU projects that are with international partners. So we have Polish partners, Bulgarian members, Romanian, but also from Western Europe. And I think that allows us to learn a lot from each other. Obviously, it would be great to tighten those ties, but I think it is a capacity issue, as Vicky has said. But I just wanted to maybe talk a bit about the positive side that we see, so that we might have something to smile about. I think in recent years we have seen a lot of self-censorship because of the laws. But I also think that we have seen a lot of bravery, and I also think that the fact that people are, still coming out every day and they are still organizing so many events for the Pride Festival is also an act of bravery. And the fact that we have more and more rainbow flags all across the country, I think these are steps that are very, very important. And we have seen from other examples, for example, from the US or from the UK or even Germany, that when you have that kind of visibility in everyday life, that can be the most important. Because, as you have said, they are dehumanizing us. They are trying to dehumanize us. And when you refuse to let them see you as an ideology, as something that only exists on Netflix or on the TV, or something that is set in Chicago, but you're wearing a rainbow badge on the Volánbusz, or you just go in to do your grocery shopping. I think that is normalizing it. Or when you hold your partner's hand. So I think that this recent wave that we have seen from a lot of people saying, I refuse to censor myself anymore, I think that is changing society every single day. So you wanted positive?
Well, you always lift me up. I really like talking to you because you always bring the hope back. Yes, 100% capacity issue. Like whenever I meet Polish activists, we are like for an hour we are just talking, and it's like, oh my God, you too, and it's like these like sudden realizations that we have very similar difficulties, and it's a good way to let off steam that we can bond over these things. And we have a lot of partners in Poland and in Slovakia and in Czech Republic and Romania and Bulgaria, like through other prides and through our refugee projects. There are a lot of ties, and everybody is always very enthusiastic. And yes, like we should do a lot of ideas like Visegrad Pride and CE conferences, and let's bring everybody from these regions to Lake Balaton and exchange experiences. Please send us a donor with a lot of money. Because like everybody would love to do that. I've spoken to many activists who were like, yes, we really need each other. But nobody wants to take these tasks upon themselves on top of everything that everybody is doing. And if I can just say like one more sentence about the horrible financial system in the European Union, and that's what I think is really bleeding us out. Like, you have to uphold your core activities, but nobody is giving you a penny for your core activities. They don't care about it. You have to come up with projects, like EU projects, all the time, and you have to be very creative to find a new project that they will fund. So you are in this like constant, already unsustainable state, and on top of that, there are your own strategic, priorities and your strategic viewpoints that you want to execute, which, like, in a lot of cases seems impossible. But I think there's like, huge potential in our organizations, and there's like a lot of knowledge that accumulated in a very, very short period of time that is beneficial for, not just for the LGBTQ community, but for the whole society to pass on this knowledge. So please don't let us go bankrupt, and we will do like wonderful things, and yeah. The word is yours.
Okay, many things now. I will start with what you said about like more flags, and also the normalization, and also being understaffed and like not having capacity. I think there was a very interesting process that happened in Poland since 2019, and it was this rainbow flag at every single pro-democratic manifestation. So even if when we were protesting for the judiciary or for free media, there were always a couple of these people with rainbow flags. And at the beginning, some of them were pushed out, with a brutal force out of this demonstration. People who were from the democratic oppositions were saying, you do not belong here. Because there are people from left to right, just anti-peace people. And terrible, right? But they were coming back. And they were coming back, and they were coming back. And they were saying, again, we belong here. We are part of this movement, and we will not put our flag down. Like, we can hold a Polish flag in one hand and a rainbow flag in the other one, because this is our identity, and the European flag also in our mouth, probably. And really, they were always there. They were pushed for the first time, for the second time, and for the third time. For the fourth time, they were not. And, in a year time, when they needed something from all these other organizations who were maybe pushing them out on the day one, no, they got the help and support. For example, legal help and support. So I think building these coalitions of all organizations that are fighting for the same cause, which is, in our case, a more open, democratic Poland in Europe, is something crucial. And really, we went through this process of normalizing this, and of putting the rainbow flag as one of many flags of organizations and ideologies and institutions in the Polish democratic scene. And this is something that nobody will take away. And right now, if an activist needs a lawyer, calls the Free Court Initiative, which is the main initiative fighting for free courts, and probably gets a free assistance, because this is what they are fighting for. And if you're asking me if we need like more cooperation or cooperation in general in our region, I mean, this is an obvious yes. And I think also this is happening. This is happening on many different levels. So yeah, the Pride organizers, I guess you talk to one another. It happens in the area of research. For us, is the most natural. When we do international events, the first countries we're looking at, the first partners we're looking at is normally Hungary and Slovakia, and Czech Republic also, but for many reasons maybe less so. But also for us, it's very natural to look at the Baltic states, because also the countries were very much alike, culturally and historically, and so we also look there, and also we have exchanges, because I think this is the key, especially between Poland and Hungary. Our governments really like one another, as you know, which I find so disturbing, especially after February 24th, after the invasion on Ukraine, and we're already talking about it. I find the visit of the Hungarian president in Poland, I think it was extremely disturbing, and the things that she said, or maybe even more what she didn't say about the aggression in Russia. But this cooperation is there, and there must be, because they like so much one another. There's so many ties between these people that if there's a new idea of Orban, you can be sure that it will be analyzed on the same day in Warsaw, and they will see how they can implement it. And if it's something that is organized in Warsaw, probably is vice versa. But also, Warsaw has, I think, this is a very special place, and because also many right-wingers in Vilnius or Riga, they look at Warsaw, and also they repeat many campaigns in their countries. And we have also examples in the area of LGBTQI mobilization, anti-mobilization from this country. So we must talk, because we must be faster, and because they are talking so much to one another, we also have to do it, because we have to be able to repeat our counter reactions, our agendas in our countries. But I'm really happy that this is happening, and this is an example that this is really happening.
Yeah, thank you very much. Our time is up.
Thank you for having us.
It was a nice ending. So thank you for joining, and we give the floor to the second discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this great discussion. And I would like to, ask Monika and Tamás Soproni to please come to the table and take your seats. All right. I think we have a lot of things and topics to discuss after this first panel. I think a lot of issues have been raised. First of all, let me introduce, of course, our guests. Monika Rosa from Poland. We are very pleased to have you. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. She's a member of the party Nowoczesna. And also she's a member of the Polish parliament. Same, I think you've been the member of the parliament for the second term. She's been involved in activities of different NGOs in Poland. And also she's participated in a lot of protests in defense of constitution, free media, free courts, women's rights, and also LGBTQI rights. And also we have Tamás Soproni. He's member of the party Momentum movement in Hungary, and he's the mayor of Budapest 6th district. And also he's the leader of Momentum's political group in the General Assembly of Budapest, the capital city of Hungary. And Tamás, he used to hold a lot of different leadership positions in the party and was very much involved in national politics before 2019, but I think since that year, you've mainly focused on local politics. However, I very much hope, and I know that you have a lot of thoughts about national issues, so I very much hope that you will bring into the discussion both the local and the national context in terms of Hungary. We've heard in the first panel that there are I think significant differences between Poland and Hungary when it comes to the social context. It was said that the Hungarian society is very much an apolitical society, whereas in Poland there have been a lot of demonstrations, counter-demonstration, counter-mobilization against a lot of policies of the Polish government, of the PiS government, especially gender rights and LGBTQI rights. You know, there is the chicken and an egg problem, which is reacting on the other, or which shapes the other. Politics shapes society, or society shapes politics. Does politics only react to society, to people's needs and wills, or or politics shapes society, shapes societal values. What do you think, how has this kind of, the different social context, how has this impacted, or how does that impact your work in Poland and Hungary? In Hungary, we've seen that most of the opposition parties rather shy away from discussing LGBTQI topics or also gender rights, whereas in Poland, the picture is probably a bit different. So, yeah. So, what's the kind of the basic, the fundamentals of politics in these two countries with regards to gender rights and LGBTQI rights?
Thank you very much for being here, for the invitation. Before 2015, the issue of gender, women's rights, LGBT people, it wasn't a topic at all. I mean, there was a narrow group of people which focused on this topic, but still it wasn't as popular as nowadays. In Poland, we do not have a law about civic union. We do not have the Gender Reconciliation Act. We do not have act about hate speech against LGBT people. So what has changed? The narrative of the governing party has changed. And the hatred and the media, public media, and the leaders of governing party changed the narrative about the LGBT people. So I think that thanks to them, thanks to the law and justice, our society mobilized so much. And a new non-governmental organization was created, and also the opposition political leaders started to interested in such topic as LGBT human and women's rights. But still, I think that Poland is just divided. And we can say that it's different than in Hungary. The opposition parties get something like almost 50% of votes in Poland, and the Law and Justice and other smaller parties get another 50. So our opposition party, we can say it's a little bit stronger than in Hungary. And also our society is a little bit stronger, as we can see during the protests, black protests, strikes, or during the marches and parades. But you know, it started to be topic also in freedom media in Poland, thanks to the law and justice, thanks to their opinion about LGBT people. And in Poland, the influence of the Catholic Church on our society and government is great. But it's not, I can't agree with Miłosz, it's ideologically. I think it's very pragmatic. It's like business as usual, because church gets money from government, governments get some profits from church, and that's why they are winning elections. So I think that most of our government doesn't believe that LGBT is an ideology. They do not believe that it's abnormal. They do not believe that you can cure being LGBT person. But they use these words just because they get political profits. But what has changed since 2015? The society accepts and understands LGBT rights much more. They know that the LGBT people live in Poland, and it's over 2 million people from LGBT society. Freedom media started to understand that LGBT people need their rights. They create a documentary film about LGBT people. The well-known Polish journalist says, my daughter or son is transgender person, or my daughter and son is a gay or lesbian. So it's not a shame in Poland to be gay, lesbian, transgender person, or to have a family which belongs to LGBT society. What has changed is that the conservative, let's say, center party, Civic Platform, the biggest opposition party in Poland, started to understand that we have to accept that LGBT people live in Poland, and we have to give them the same rights as have the rest of the society. So the civic unions is something normal for them now. So the Gender Reconciliation Act started to be something normal to do. The fights with hatred speech, it's something normal for them. So it has changed.
Before reacting to your question, I'm sorry to answer, and I would like to react to something that's been voiced in the previous conversation, previous panel, because I think the Page Pride was a very important event in I think Hungary's LGBTQ history as well, being the first bigger Pride event in the country. I mean, besides Budapest, and I think I may have misunderstood it. But I think it has been said that no parties were really involved in it, I mean opposition parties, and I wanted to express and emphasize that actually I do know that our MEPs were there, the president of our party, Momentum, was there, and the local representative, Balázs Nemes, was also there. He might have not took the stage, but he was there, and they were there, and I'm actually very proud of my party's braveness, courage, that we actually, I think we do voice these issues, and maybe it's better in Poland, I'm not sure, but I do think that Momentum is probably the most pro-LGBTQI+ party in Hungary. But besides that, answering your question, of course, I'm actually quite optimistic in a strange way, because I feel that in spite of what's happening in the political side, in spite of what the government is doing, I think even as a mayor I meet very many lower people from the lower classes as well. And as I talk to our colleagues as well, who work on the streets and so on, and anytime this issue comes up, I think they are more open than they were probably 10 years ago. And I think one of the reasons is, well, we live in the capital city, which is always more liberal, and of course Budapest, and especially my district, which is, well, in the inner city, it's kind of probably the more liberals, one of the more liberals, most liberals. But I think there is one very important thing that is changing, that more and more people come out. And I think it's much easier to be anti-gay if you do not have someone in your close relations, if you do not have a kid, a granddaughter even, who is gay. It's much easier then to be anti-gay. And I think I see this, I may be naive, but I see a good trend as well. As for the political side, unfortunately, that's different, true. But we are, I think, the case then very similar in our countries, because it's not an ideological thing in the government. I do not think that Viktor Orban actually hates gays. He just wants to keep power. That's the only thing that defines their political moves, all of them. And it's just kind of, I think, an ideological hooey that covers their political aims, their political goals, these ideological hooeys, the Christian teachings, which are actually not. I mean, at most it's some Old Testament thing that's what they preach. And I think our issue as well, maybe that's the case in Poland as well, that many people look for protectors. I mean, physical protection as well, but somehow they look for people, leaders, who protect them from new things, because people are conservative in most ways. I mean, they like the word better when they were 20. When they were in their 20s, because it's always better to be young, and so you want to keep those things, that word that was present there. So it's much easier, I think, among the elderlies to promote these, well, not ideological but political issues.
Also, in the previous panel, we've heard about the fear that anti-gender, anti-LGBTQI mobilization by the governing parties in both countries are spreading in the society. I would assume, like, politics which is based on human rights and which stands up against such against incitement of hatred against any minority groups, should provide protection for people who are concerned or are in fear because of this mobilization. Based on your practical, like everyday experience or practical work, what can you do as politician, either at the national level or at the local level, to provide this support, provide people who are concerned, who are in fear, with support, with protection?
Let's take turns then. I think it's not a duty. It's kind of a moral must, a moral imperative to stand up for all the groups that are being hurt by a bully. And I think our government is a bully. And it's much easier for them to be aggressive, to push down and oppress some groups, which are sometimes invisible, unfortunately, than to face problems on their own level. Than to face problems like we have now here, like the salaries of teachers, police officers, like inflation, like all kind of financial and economic issues. And it's easier to give some kind of enemy to the people that follow them. And I think it's a must for us. So what can we do? Then we must think about that, of course. And on a local level, it's quite hard because we have a 2/3 majority governing party in the country. So whatever we do from our local few billion forints, it's never going to be enough, of course. But we still can do a few things. For example, I'm proud. It's a very tiny thing, but I'm proud that we created some kind of equality, at least in some local social supports. Subsidization, like we had a newlyweds package that had been only given to heterosexual couples who got married, and now we provide it to gay couples who get in a civil union as well. I'm very proud that we can actually sensitize our people as well, like our police officers, the people who work at the mayor's office. For example, a gay couple a few weeks back actually told me, wrote me on Facebook that they wanted to get in a civil union, get married, but that's basically it, yeah. Should be, but it's not still. But and they said that they called many other mayor's offices, and well, they weren't denied, they weren't pushed away, but still it was like a strange feeling, like they didn't really want them there. And my colleagues, I was very proud of them, because they're actually many of them conservative people, and still they were open-minded, they were proactive, and they helped them, and they got into civil union at our place, which I'm very proud of. So I think we can sensitize our people as well, like the people who work for us. I also think, I really despise those politicians who believe in something, but for fear of, I don't know, of the repercussions of the actual governing party's attack, they don't dare stepping up. And there are some parties, for example, in Hungary, like Jobbik, who actually voted for the anti-LGBTQ law that Fidesz enacted. And sometimes we are not brave enough, and I do despise it. And I think we should talk to those people, all parties in the opposition, that 1.7 million people, I think, who actually invalidated their own ticket on election day on these idiotic questions. I think we should talk to them. We should give a moral support to them. They should see that there are actually bloody politicians who are standing up for them. And I don't think they can see us now. Not enough, at least. Sometimes because actually, really, we are cowardly. I mean, I think we are not, but many politicians are cowardly.
Okay, so our government is really good in looking for a group of enemies in Poland, because it's easy to govern if you have a group of enemies. In 2015, there were migrants and refugees, and then lawyers, teachers, disabled people, opposition parties, and now we came back to refugees and also LGBT people. So as you can see, a lot of people, a lot of group of enemies. And when I started to be a deputy, I even don't imagine what will be my job. And now, what can we do? We also we usually do in Parliament. We can create, and we did it. We created a parliamentary group focused on LGBT rights. So we used to meet in the Parliament and discuss different topics connected with LGBT society, such as law, the situation of LGBT people, rainbow families, hate speech, and so on. So the first time in the history of Polish Parliament, these topics are discussed in a building of Parliament. The second thing we can do as deputies is created proposals of acts connected with gender equality and LGBT society. But we are also creating debates connected, focused on these topics and trying to, let's say, combat in media debate with people who says no, it's ideology, and we say no, it's human rights. But what is even more important is trying to change the way people think in Poland. And that's why we are not only use the media in Poland, but I was traveling around Poland to different cities, sometimes with non-governmental organizations, and meeting with different groups of people. And it was sometimes very small meetings with 7, 12, 20 people, but these people had an opportunity to ask questions they could never ask. So, for example, they asked me, but if there is a gay couple, who is a man and who is a lady? And it was a very important question for them because they think they have never, ever in their lives met a gay couple. And also during the marches and parades, some elder people came, I trying to talk with them, and they say, well, we are here because we would want to see a lesbian. Because we heard a lot of a lesbian in Poland, and we have never seen a lesbian. So, you know, people are very interested in it. And if you don't know a gay couple, if you don't know a lesbian couple, it's much easier to make you afraid of LGBT people than if you know, okay, my neighbor or maybe my doctor, they are part of LGBT society. But what is unfortunately very important in Poland is to protect people from our government. Not only by talking to them, not only by creating debate and trying to change society thinking, but to be true physically, by our bodies. During the demonstrations, during the marches, it was also not only during the LGBT marches, but also during the black strikes in Poland. When we have to, let's say, stand between police officers and activists and say, no, you cannot arrest them. And we are just, standing in front of the police car and say, no, you won't take these people, you won't arrest them. And we're looking for people in police stations just to support them and say, yes, we will support you, yes, we will find a lawyer for you, yes, we will help you. So that's our job now, protect everyone who suffers because of our government. And I'm pretty pessimistic, unfortunately, because the campaign in Poland has started. And again, the LGBT topic started to be an issue. And again, the leader of the governing party says that, we can cure trans people. And I think it's just the beginning. In Poland will be worse and worse. I think that unfortunately it works for people who live in Poland just because of the public media. It's 7 years when 30% of people in Poland has an access only to public media if we're considering the public information. So after 7 years of watching public media, they just believe what they heard. And it's really hard to convince them that LGBT people are normal people and they are not pedophiles and they want sexualize their children. But on the other hand, a lot of people has understood what does it mean, human rights. What is upsetting me, you know, I'm from a pretty big city, from Katowice, it's Silesia. I am a deputy, I can find help. But still, people calling my office and says that they will kill me because I support LGBT people. They attacked my office and write on the window of my office, let's say in parliamentary language, LGBT, get out. So it was in original pedały raus in Polish. I see that our society changed. Let's say 60%, maybe more, supports civic union and LGBT rights, but still there is 40, which we have to convince.
So in the first panel, they talked about the LGBT-free zones in Poland and the recent ruling of the court. In Hungary, we had a similar case. We had actually one similar case in Ásottalan, which is a small village at the southern border of Hungary, governed by the leader of the far-right party, who a couple of years ago introduced a similar legislation banning all LGBTQI propaganda from his village. And interestingly, in this case, the local kind of government office took steps and I think said that this local legislation was not is breaking the constitution, so it's not effective anymore. In Poland, you needed a civil lawsuit, if I understood it well, to bring it to the constitutional court, saying that it's not right, it's breaking the constitution. So how do you see the situation at the local level in Poland and Hungary? How do you see local governments dealing with this topic in Poland and Hungary? I assume there is a difference between local or municipalities governed by Fidesz mayors or governed by opposition mayors. What's the general situation in these two countries?
Okay, so in local governments, the situation depends on who is a leader of local government. If it's the opposition party or if it's a law and justice. There used to be a time when the so-called LGBT-free zones were pretty popular as an act of local government. But as in a society, when it's action, there is no reaction. So in some governments, local governments, the mayor of the city or people who work for him was trying to support LGBT people. For example, supporting by money non-governmental organization. In Kraków and in Warsaw, local government created hostels for young people who escaped from their homes because of the homophobia of their parents. Some governments also, one of governments has their non-LGBT acts. Other governments created their LGBT rights acts. So it really depends. But still, I was also traveling around the country, trying to convince the local government who wanted to have their anti-LGBT act not to do it. And the main reason why some of them resigned from it, it wasn't, explaining it's like human rights, it's young people coming to school and having depression. It didn't convince them. What was the most important was money, because some local government has to face the fact that the European fundings were shorted just because of this anti-LGBT act. So only money convinced them not to do it or resign from it. And this local act is not doesn't change the situation of LGBT people in Poland, but still is so important in the symbolic meaning. In Poland, 50% of young LGBT people suffered from depression. 70% of them have suicide thoughts, sometimes very often. And that's why it's so important that they have our support on every level, family, local, and central. They are the most important.
Yeah, well, the local level, I think it's always a bit less polarized because I think mayors tend to deal with actual issues like development projects, like social issues, like how we can help people, the poor in our districts. So it's a bit better. Of course, politics is in everything, and I think the worst example was when the mayor of the 21st district, Leonard Borby, he banned a pro-gay storybook in the nurseries of his district, as if that were somehow a creation of evil. And I think that's one of the most heinous crimes of this government. I think what you also refer to, that the banning of education on gay issues in schools, but not in nurseries, not in kindergarten, of course, that's, I think, less important, but as a teenager, when you grow up, even as a heterosexual person, you have so many issues, so many problems, and being different, and feeling that you are different, feeling that you are not normal, that's, I can't even imagine it. I mean, that's the worst thing that you can feel. And that's why it's the most really heinous crime of the government. And once again, it's not ideological. It's completely political because it implies somehow that you can become gay if you hear about gay things. I mean, I think one of the biggest fans of ABBA and Mamma Mia and all musicals and Disney, and I'm still not gay. So that just doesn't work so. And it really is evil. But of course, once again, politics is in everything. And for example, if you build a playground, I mean, you can choose as a mayor, as a local leader, the theme of the playground. I mean, it does matter if you choose, I don't know, János Vitéz, a Hungarian tale story, in which there is a very strong male character that saves the lady, or you choose, well, Frozen, in which there are two female characters that talk not only about boys, but like actual issues, social issues. So it does matter what we do on a local level, but of course we can't provide enough support when the state government, when the central government is actually against everything that represents freedom.
What can I add is about the schools, because we have a very, very conservative Minister of Education, very conservative, and in some local government, it was pretty popular to have anti-discrimination or sexual education at schools, and it was local initiatives. And now schools are very afraid of putting in real non-governmental organization to have lessons with children, because they are afraid what the Minister of Education could do with the school and director of the school. So even the small symbols of pluralism in Poland now is banned, just because people are afraid. And the fear is such a powerful tool to stop even the smallest one, initiative.
We had a workshop with, seminar rather, with Polish and Hungarian participants in the frame of the project. And we also discussed the question, what's the realistic goal of advocacy in such a political situation as in Poland and Hungary? And a Polish participant said that in Poland, that the situation between Poland and Hungary is also different with regards to the fact that PiS is in a coalition government with some minor parties, and so they have to make compromises, and sometimes there are internal fightings among the coalition partners in Hungary. On the contrary, we have a very massive majority of the governing party in the parliament, so it's a massive bloc where probably, or most probably, there are internal fightings or internal disputes within the party, but it never comes to the external world. So what do you think, what is the kind of realistic goal of oppositional politics or advocacy in such political circumstances in Hungary and Poland?
To be honest, this protecting the status quo, I think that's the most that we can do right now against the two-thirds majority governing parties after being crushed a few months ago. I mean, altogether, after seeing that opposition, not parties, but people, voters, they are disenchanted, disillusioned, and I completely understand them. I mean, I feel their pain. I mean, what can you do? And what we can do is, I think, and that's why it's very important to keep our at least local paths, local bastions, where we can just. So that's why it's very important to keep our local bastions, because I think Budapest, with the Lord Mayor being Gergely Karácsony, is a much better place, much more liberal place, much freer place than it was a few years back in the Tarlós era. I mean, really, it's just better to live here for everyone who loves freedom. So it is important to keep at least what we have now. And how we move forward is, I think, what I wanted to imply before, to express before, that we must talk to those people who are with us, that 1.7 million, and then we can grow. I mean, because our masses, our crowds can grow, but before having a very strong ideological basis, we can't do that, because we saw what happened to the opposition with this very colorful coalition, which was led by, well, a conservative person. I'm not really sure about what he thinks about gay rights. So maybe if we were honest with ourselves and with our supporters, then we could move forward and then somehow defeat this government. And we will have 4 years. We have now 4 years to somehow get stronger. And in the meantime, we must protect once again our bastions in cities, in bigger cities. That's what we can do, I think, now.
Well, we have only 1 year to the elections, and we observe what's going on in Hungary. And you know, we need to. What is happening in Hungary will sooner or later happen in Poland, because what is your president do in Hungary, in a few months, will happen in Poland for sure. But what can we do? It's all about working with civic society. It's all about talking with people, not only by media, but just face to face. And this personal campaign, the meeting with people in the smaller cities and trying to convince them and trying to reduce the level of trans and homophobic. It is important. To traveling with same-sex couple and telling their stories, because human stories, it is what can convince people. Miłosz said about the non-governmental organization called Love Does Not Exclude. And this organization made their social pools. And if we are talking about the human stories and rainbow families, because they created a campaign about the rainbow families, and they asked people in Poland who vote for different parties if we should protect children. Most of them said, yes, we should protect children. If they asked them, what is family? If 2 girls and 2 boys with children is family, people usually said, yes, it is family. So we said about Ania and Nadzieja, who are daughters of the same-sex couple in a small city in Poland, and we are telling their stories, that they are afraid that if biological mother dies, her daughter will be left alone because this social mother doesn't have rights to their children. And we are talking about these human stories and people trying to understand what are we talking about, that it's not, you know, the human rights, big words. What does it mean? It means that Ania and Nadzieja have family and their mother loves them so much, and that's why we have to explain it to people.
You mentioned that you know, you're scrutinizing the situation in Hungary and kind of learn from the Hungarian situation. And also it was discussed in the first panel that the two governments, the Hungarian and the Polish government, the two governing parties very much like each other and also learn from each other, and sometimes also kind of copying strategies from each other and issues from each other. And you also mentioned that there is 1 year until your next election in Poland. And also Tamás mentioned the defeat of the Hungarian opposition just a few months back. So, like, how do you prepare for the next election in Poland? Also, like, learning from the Hungarian opposition situation, but also with regards to what you said, that you expect that the gender issues and LGBTIQ issues will play a crucial role in the upcoming campaign.
So we are observing you. And we are considering what is the best strategy for us, to have one block of different parties, or maybe not. I know it doesn't work in your case. Of course, our political system is pretty much different, but still, we are still discussing. And what can you learn for you is the creative way of conducting campaign. So that's very important for us, how to create new tools to convince people, to reach the people, how to use new media, and how to make them wanted to vote. Because the great problem in Poland is that people doesn't believe that their vote counts. And we haven't decided yet. And I think it's too easy to say what are we going to do. But still, it will be like two different words. Are you for or against? For human rights, for women's rights, for LGBT rights, or against? And there will be nothing in the middle. There can't be nothing in the middle. Years ago, before 2015, as I said before, these human rights, it wasn't a topic. There was no law connected with LGBT people in Poland. No law. Still, if you wanted to well, there is no civic union. In Hungary, there is. So I think it's very different. Reconciliation Act. If you wanted to reconcile your gender, you have to sue your parents in Poland. Yes, you have to. Yeah, I know it's funny, but still. So hate speech, can't fight it with anyway. So I think that this basic thing are in common for different parties in Poland. So maybe not equal marriage, but civic union, hate speech, anti-discrimination education, in something that we have in common. I think opposition parties have more in common than there are differences between us. And of course, there are conservative, center, leftist, but still we understand very much that if we lose this election, there will be no free media in Poland, there will be no strong non-governmental organization in Poland, and the situation of women, LGBT people, disabled people, minorities, different minorities will be worse and worse. That's why it's so important for us. And I hope we'll have enough power and enough fight that not differences between parties, not leaders of the party will be the most important, but these particular topics and people.
I I'm really rooting for you. I mean, really. I mean, give us some hope, some sparkle of hope here, over here. And I think a total coalition, an all-party coalition, can work if ideologies do not cancel each other. So if they are not too far from each other, because we had that, I think, in Hungary. And you must create a vision of a world where you and your voters want to live in, and you have to talk about that vision. I mean, I know you know that it's just what we well, didn't do, I think. I mean, we talked about many things, how we hate Viktor Orbán and how bad things he does, but not about what world we want to create, what country we want to create, and that was, I think, the main reason of the defeat. Of course, there were others like the war, and so it was very bad timing. But anyway, so I'm really rooting for you.
As you know, the government coalition is a coalition, but it's not a coalition between conservative and maybe more right conservative. It's far right conservative and far right conservative. So, you know, they are arguing not if to, you know, the civic, to introduce the Civic Union Act. They are asking if to ban of having rainbow flags, or maybe ban to having children by LGBT people. So that's a discussion in Poland in a government coalition, and we do not reconsidering having a great coalition with far-right opposition party in Poland. We are thinking about, you know, center, conservative, left, but not, there's a coalition called Konfederacja, and it's, I think, more far-right even if than Law and Justice in Poland. So no, they won't join our coalition.
And Tomasz, does the Hungarian opposition, or does your party also observe the situation in Poland so closely as the Polish opposition observes the situation in Hungary? What can you, the Hungarian opposition, or Hungarian actors committed to human rights, learn from the Polish situation, the Polish opposition parties, but also from the Polish society, which is much more active politically than the Hungarian one?
Yeah, I think it would be nice to know the roots of this, their being more active. And I'm not sure I'm right, of course, because I'm not a Polish expert at all. I think our country is very individualistic, and that may... we are not such a Christian country. I mean, the government wants to say that, but we are actually not. I mean, just between I think in 2001, there was a total, not referendum, sorry, population count, and in 2011, and 1 million only Catholics disappeared. So people basically are agnostic. And we are very, I think our governments have always been very neoliberal as well. So I think we are just very individualistic. So we don't step up for others, not even for ourselves. I mean, come on, I just go home, and even if I don't earn that much as a teacher, I don't do nothing. I mean, just I can watch the telly still. I mean, I can buy a beer and I can be fine. But no, you can't. And I'm not sure if that's the reason, but I think you have a more community-based country, nation, and I do envy you for that. I mean, we are disillusioned, disenchanted, and you have these huge masses, crowds that go out for gay rights, against anti-abortion laws. And I can't imagine what would happen if the government would enact an anti-abortion law. Probably there would be like 10,000 people on the streets, and not more. So I do envy it. I'm sure we can be better at mobilizing people. So of course there are technologies that we can learn, but I think we have to go to the roots of our society, and that you can do only from a governmental position. But I do believe that we can still a much better place. So I think that's what we can learn and must learn.
Thank you, yes. And to finish our discussion with a kind of positive message, would you have any message for LGBTQI people in Hungary and all those who are who care about gender rights and LGBTQI rights. So do you have a message for all these people, also with regards to the Budapest Pride Festival? And if so, what would be your kind of positive message for the future?
Tough work to do. Love wins. Sooner or later, we will win. And our rights will be equal. Our countries will be open. Our countries will join the European family countries who believe that every human has the same rights. And I believe it will be sooner than later. And the tough time we have now in Poland and Hungary, it will be like, a black dream. And I believe that all of us will be equal. Doesn't matter who we believe in, who we are, who we love. That's all.
I'm still optimistic. I mean, the zeitgeist, the tendencies, the worldwide tendencies are still, I think, good in the Western Hemisphere. And they have such a cultural impact on our people, and not our governments, perhaps, but Netflix and all the series that young people watch, and it does impact them. Probably the right-wing government would say that it's LGBTQI propaganda. I just say that they show that gay people exist, and that's the most important thing. I mean, they can love, they feel the same things that we do, and I think that they want to go against the river, and they can do that for a while, but then they will just perish. I mean, their stupid ideas will perish. And I hope, the sooner the better. But we will fight until then.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, for being with us for the discussion also. Thank you so much to all of you who followed our event, either here in person or online. Thank you so much. Goodbye.